Okay, the question we're going to start with is, why is there so much conflict in the world? Now, I think there's a lot of reasons, but I believe a big part of the explanation is that there's so much disagreement when it comes to fundamental questions about right and wrong, the nature of justice, the nature of good government, and things like that. I mean, consider discrimination. Now, from what I can tell, some people honestly believe that discriminating on the basis of race, or gender, or sexual orientation, or nation of birth, or religious orientation is not only okay, but it's something that they're supposed to do. They sincerely believe that one or more of these kinds of discrimination is morally required. Take someone like that and put them together with someone who believes just as sincerely that those kinds of discrimination are all morally forbidden. Chances are these two people are eventually going to come into real conflict with each other because their belief systems, their moral belief systems, are in conflict with each other. So again, my point here is that one of the big reasons why there's so much conflict in the world is because there's so much disagreement about the fundamentals of things like right and wrong. Now, let me be clear. I'm not saying that all of the conflicts in the world are based entirely on these fundamental disagreements. I'm almost certain that there's more to it than that. But I do believe that these kinds of disagreement are among the main causes of conflict. So then, are these disagreements inevitable? You might think, well, yeah, of course they are. And you might be right, but let me explain why I think there's room for a lot of hope. I'm going to offer you a perspective on why there is so much of this kind of disagreement, this kind of fundamental disagreement. And from there, I think we'll start to get an understanding of how we can move forward. But to do this, I'm going to take you on a quick detour. We're going to talk for a minute about mathematics. Now, there's three things I want you to notice about mathematics. First of all, everyone all over the world is taught the same basic mathematical rules, essentially the same mathematical theory. You don't have one version of arithmetic, for example, being taught in the US and a different conflicting version of arithmetic being taught in China. You don't have one version of algebra being taught in Iran and a different conflicting version being taught in New Zealand. From arithmetic to calculus and beyond, it's basically just one big mathematical theory that gets taught all over the world. Now, part of the reason people all over the world have seen fit to teach this one overarching mathematical theory is that this theory meets extremely high standards of evidence. It's extremely well justified. And that's the second point I want you to note about mathematics. It's extremely well justified, meets extremely high standards of evidence. Now, the third point is related to this second point. It's that mathematical theory is so strongly justified, it meets such high standards of evidence that nobody ever sees any good reason to reject it. So, it's not much of a surprise that we're all on the same page when it comes to arithmetic, algebra, and whatever bits of mathematical theory we've learned and retained. But now, do those 3 points hold true for any of our theories about morality? Do they hold true for any of our theories of justice? Do they hold true for any school of thought about good government? Short answer, no, not even close. Let's take moral theory, which we can roughly describe as theory about how individuals should act and live and what kinds of character traits they should have or pursue. Human beings have been theorizing about morality about as long as we've been theorizing about mathematics. But obviously, we're not all on the same page when it comes to questions about how individuals should act, or how they should live, or what kinds of character traits they should have or pursue. Getting back to our 3 points, you probably already know that there's no moral theory that's being taught to everyone all over the world. There's not even a set of basic moral rules that's taught globally. What you might not know is that when it comes to standards of evidence, level of justification, there's a big difference between mathematicians and moral theorists, even for those at the very top of these two disciplines. Every moral theory that's ever been published has made a lot of questionable assumptions. Also, moral theorists often make logical leaps that they're often not even aware of because, unlike mathematicians, they don't break everything down precisely and lay everything out. So, of course, for every moral theory that's ever been published, there have been people who saw good reason to reject it. So, as far as each of our 3 points is concerned, mathematical theory is way ahead of moral theory. And by the way, mathematical theory is also way ahead of all our theories about justice, good government, and those sorts of things. Now, the point of this comparison is not to bash moral theory, or theories of justice, or theories of good government, or whatever. Although I should say real quick that critiquing these theories and these theorists is something I think is going to be called for, but I'll get into that some other time. The point of comparing moral theory to mathematics is really to get us to this question. What if we had a moral theory and a theory of justice and a theory of good government and so forth that were on par with mathematical theory when it comes to those 3 points? I mean, imagine what our world would look like if everyone all over the world learned the same basic moral rules, essentially the same moral theory. Imagine also that everyone learned the same theory of justice, good government, etc. And now imagine all of these theories met mathematicians' standards of evidence. So nobody saw any good reason to reject any of them.